Hello, and welcome to the Business of Unbecoming, which is a journal where I reflect on my life as a second generation family business owner. This podcast is the audio edition of my Substack newsletter, produced for those who would rather listen than read. Today's journal entry is titled Unbecoming Borrowed Biographies. Enjoy. Nobody warned me about the uncertainty and emotional chaos I would feel after graduating from my master's degree. It's reasonable to feel uncertain for the first 6 months or year following graduation. However, to remain with that feeling for 3 years, that I did not expect. The unsettling feelings were worsened by the thought of my age. At the time of graduating, 30 March 2022, I was 29 years old. And before the end of the year, I would be 30 years old. This is an age when we expected to have it all figured out. Career, marriage, house, pension funds, and children. Not only was it something I felt was expected of me, but it is also something I was observing my peers do. Almost everyone I had gone to school with or was friends with on Facebook had at least one of these figured out. Yet I had nothing. Not even a boyfriend or fur baby. All I had acquired in my own name by the age of 30 were my 2 undergraduate and postgraduate degrees and a humble savings account. To top it all, I was also starting to shed my identity as a writer. And with this realization came a lot of anxiety for my future. Because this was an identity that was integral to building my self-esteem back up. After dropping out of university in 2014, following a major depressive disorder diagnosis in 2013, which I was struggling to cope with as a student. Part of the work of building my morale back up during my dropout year included asking myself what I wanted to do with my life. Before dropping out of university, I was a film student, aspiring towards becoming an actress and ultimately a movie director. However, I soon realized early on in my degree that directing from behind the camera was not my destiny. It was a shiny identity that I liked from afar. But when I got too close and tried it on for size, I found it to fit awkwardly. So when I dropped out of school, I had to ask myself again, what do I want to be when I grow up? The answer had to fall within the framework of my degree, which was the dramatic arts, because I was adamant about completing what I had started. I wasn't prepared to start all over again in another specialty. Therefore, I had to trace the steps that led to me enrolling into a dramatic arts degree. And after paging through many of my old journals that were bulging at the seams, I discerned that I am a writer. I noticed that when I was younger, instead of video recording and editing films, I wrote screen and stage plays. Or I at least attempted to. Thus, after almost a year-long introspection, the answer I landed on was writer. I wanted to professionally pursue writing. I saw myself successfully making a living as a writer. My ultimate prize became to tell stories and entertain people and not be contained as a storyteller. Therefore, I could see myself writing screenplays, performing my poems on stage, and succeeding in the role of producer at some point in my writing career. Naturally, when one decides on a professional pursuit, they tend to look for role models, and that is what I did. After Googling something along the lines of Black woman, writer, and poetry for inspiration, a black and white picture of Elizabeth Acevedo with a big Cheshire smile popped up. It was charming, and I became curious about her. When I continued to look her up and learn more about her feisty personality and her achievements, I became obsessed with her, and I wanted to follow a similar path as hers. In fact, instead of viewing her as a reference of what was possible for an aspiring black female writer, I wanted to be her. I wanted her achievements to be mine. I essentially borrowed my writing identity from Elizabeth Acevedo, and when I returned to school and was praised for my written assignments, my plan to become her was affirmed. During the years that followed, between returning to my undergraduate studies and qualifying for my postgraduate degree, all the course choices I made were informed by becoming a writer and lecturer just like Elizabeth Acevedo. She was my North Star. So to arrive at my 30s and start shedding again, another identity that motivated everything I had achieved up until that point was even more disrupting than before. Where was I going without Elizabeth Acevedo as my pole star? What would I continue to achieve without her biography as my blueprint? Typically, when erratic change occurs in our lives, we tend to grasp at straws. Anything that can stop us from feeling like we are unraveling and help us feel a sense of stability, even if it's false. We'll resort to any desperate situation or unlikely means of salvation to save ourselves. As the proverb goes, a drowning man will clutch at a straw. Likewise, to stop myself from drowning into a second black hole set in motion by the collapse of Elizabeth Acevedo's inspiring identity, I grasped at one more straw. Yep, the biography of another influential woman. Clearly, self-introspection is hard work, because what I thought was self-introspection was actually me plagiarizing other people's biographies. Following Elizabeth Acevedo, I began borrowing the thrilling example of travel blogger Brooke Saywood. But what is different this time is that what began as a borrowed biography has surprisingly morphed into something that feels uniquely my own. Whereas Brooke Saywood's bio was that of a travel blogger touring foreign destinations across the world, I became a travel podcaster focused on exploring my home country and sharing travel information from a local's perspective, instead of the typical outsider's perspective that is pervasive in the travel blogger sphere. These variations gave me a needed point of difference from Brooke. As much as I wanted to be her and have her life, I still needed to build my own unique brand from hers to find some success as a travel content creator, which I've started to see a glimpse of. The reception since publishing my travel podcast has been heartening. In 2023, my podcast was listed as one of the top 5 best South Africa travel podcasts. Soon after that news, it went global and is now, at the time of publishing this newsletter, listened to in 30 different countries across all 6 inhabited continents. Then in 2024, I was approached with 2 international brand collaboration deals, one from America and the other from Europe. Yet, just when I thought I had it figured out, something else is emerging which I am struggling to embrace. My ego is struggling to seize the second-generation family business owner promotion I've recently inherited. Because, number 1, that is not part of the script of the latest biography I've been assimilating. Number 2, it is also not easy to accept being the number 2, especially in a zeitgeist where the people who get applause are those that have independence from their parents and are startup founders. Number 3, I fear that inheriting the family business now instead of later will distract me from my travel podcast. It was not part of my plan, at least for now. So, I'm struggling to see how I can manage both pursuits simultaneously. I feel like I must abandon one for the other. I'm not certain if this intersection I currently find myself at is another shedding versus layering onto my new identity as a travel podcaster. Anyway, this time I am committing to not dictating the outcome. Rather, I'm going to allow myself to become undone here in this newsletter, which has now become my business journal, and sit with the contradictions of who I am becoming. Instead of wayfinding, using other people's biographies as my escape from my own reality, I choose to dwell in the wildness of my unraveling, where anything is possible. This is the unbecoming of me, Piladi Pasha. Welcome to my mess. We've reached the end of this journal entry. Thank you for listening. Talk to you in the next episode. Goodbye.